Allow me to explain why Donald Trump was right about Sweden. Right? The left apparently thinks Trump made a gaffe when he included Sweden in a list of countries that had undergone recent violence relating to immigration. I disagree with the left's interpretation. Check out the footage of what Trump actually said.
You look at what's happening in Germany. You look at what's happening last night in Sweden. Sweden. Who would believe this? Sweden. They took in large numbers. They're having problems like they never thought possible. You look at what's happening in Brussels. You look at what's happening all over the world. Take a look at Nice. Take a look at Paris. We've allowed thousands and thousands of people into our country, and there was no way to vet those people.
And Trump clarified via tweet just a few hours ago before I filmed this presentation, in case you had any doubt, that he was referring to issues being caused by immigration in Sweden. Not a terrorist attack. You will notice Donald does not say anything about a terrorist attack last night in Sweden. No, he just says last night in Sweden. And what could he be talking about? Well, in his tweet, he mentions a report he had just watched on Fox News about how people high up in the Swedish government are trying to cover up who the perpetrator of rape crimes are to protect the vulnerable migrant class. A report with a lot of merit that Trump is not the first one to point out this issue, I will tell you. Because to go into some real numbers for you about what's happening in Sweden, according to the most recent crime data we have for Sweden, the 2016 year, released by the Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention, there were 6,560 rapes and 10,500 incidents of sexual assault, which totaled together is 17,060 incidents. In the U.S., there are sadly already over 79,000 comparable incidents per year, according to FBI data, of sexual offenses. But this is with a population, keep in mind, of 320 million people in America, compared to Sweden's population of not even quite 10 million people. They have like 9.9 million people in Sweden. So let's say they have 10 million people in Sweden compared to 320 million in America. 32 times different, 32 times greater population in America, right? So that's important to keep in mind in these figures. And we'll go into that more in just a second, but the math on that is that with those population numbers in America, what it works out to is with 79,000 people, 320 million population, that's about a 1 in 4,000 chance. About 1 in 4,000 people will be victims of sexual assault, rape. Right? But you compare this to Sweden, 1 in 586. 1 in 4,000 to 1 in 586. And I think that that is quite sad, and hopefully we can actually learn some lessons here, which is what Trump is talking about, learning some lessons from these countries, because that's a serious issue. And in case you might be thinking, but hey, mansplained, surely the migrants aren't to blame for those higher numbers. Maybe there's other factors, right? Surely it's not the migrants. That's just racist of you. Well, unfortunately, in 2016, we no longer have data on what race the perpetrator of various crimes is. The Swedish government, at least, does not release this information anymore. And some of the reasons that have been cited for this are, for example, to protect the vulnerable migrant class, right? We just can't have this information getting out because it fuels extremism and things. But there is some data. And I think the data is probably still quite relevant because although it's from late 1990s and early 2000s studies, I kind of doubt that the migrants have just started raping at magnitudes less than they were then. So let's go over some of the numbers that we do have available here from this study here. A 1996 report by the Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention. So not some, right-wing American think tank or something. No, it's coming from the Swedish government. A 1996 report determined that between 1985 and 1989, individuals born in the Middle East or Africa were convicted of rape, not accused, mind you, but convicted of rape, at a rate 17 to 23 times greater than people born in Sweden. And it depends on country of origin. And I won't bore you with this, but they actually break it down. As people coming from Iraq have 20 times higher, and people coming from these regions of North Africa have 17 times higher, and these regions 22 times higher, and etc. Right? And so I'm giving you a bit of a range. But yeah, North African, Middle East immigrants, according to the last published numbers Sweden has on this, and yes, they're a bit old, but these numbers show that they're 17 to 23 times more likely to be involved. Sorry, not to be involved, to be convicted of rape. 1,700% to 2,300%. Very, very big numbers. And then another study that was published in 2005 by the Swedish National Council for Crime Prevention, again, that was studying 4.4 million Swedes between the ages of 15 and 51 during the period of 1997 to 2001, found several interesting things that I'd like to share with you. And this is regarding immigrants overall, whereas the previous study was focused more on immigrants from specific regions. So now this study is about immigrants overall. And the first interesting thing that I want to point out is that and then recall again, this is from the Swedish government. They found that it is 6 times as likely for persons from families registered as having received social welfare to be registered for crime. Registered for crime is, there's some translation issues because this is coming directly from the Swedish authorities in Swedish. But registered for crime is they were actually committing crime, convicted of crime. They entered the system involving this crime. So people receiving welfare benefits, 6 times more likely to be involved in these serious crimes as it is for persons from families who have not been in receipt of welfare benefits. 6 times. So while there's a lot of factors we can talk about, and there's socioeconomic factors, man, and there's the refugees, man. We just got to open our hearts to them. And we can do stuff like that, but I think it's important to keep in mind that welfare, from everything history and facts and data is telling us, welfare by and large doesn't seem to be particularly helpful for people. Okay? But I'm going to move on. The second interesting thing I found from this report released by the Swedish government is that the relative risk to be convicted of a crime is 2.5 times greater for foreign-born people living in Sweden. 250% more likely to commit crimes in Sweden as someone foreign-born. And if you're contrasting this with the numbers I gave you a moment ago that were much higher, with 1,700% to 2,300% for people from North Africa to Middle East, and now I'm giving you these numbers from a study a few years in the future, and you're like, oh geez, well the numbers are so much lower, only 250%, what's going on there? It's not that they've dropped by an order of magnitude, no. What's happening here is in this study, as I tried to point out earlier, the 2005 study here, they are taking all foreign-born people and lumping them into one category and averaging it here, right? They're not just talking about North African and Middle East migrants now, who have the 17 to 23 times greater rate. And they point this out. It's not just me having to point this out. They point out that, quote, "It's important to note that these figures include people living in Sweden but born in America, Norway, and other peaceful countries, who bring the average way down from the 1,700 to 2,300% figures." And yeah, the report points this out, that people from New Zealand, Asia, USA, Canada, Australia, etc., these people are registered as crime suspects least often. And of course, even in this study 10 years ago, they don't give individual data. They don't say, oh, well, people from the USA and Canada commit, this many crimes or whatever, they're this likely. No, they just average it all together. So, and they do luckily point out for us that, yeah, we averaged in the Americans and the Canadians to bring the numbers down. It's basically what they're telling you. But even with all the Americans and the UK people and New Zealand and Australia and Canada and all these peaceful countries, even with all those people averaged in, those people who moved to Sweden, still, people who are foreign born in Sweden, 250% more likely to be involved in crime. Okay? That's not a small number. And the report goes on to say, doubly interesting for me, even persons born in Sweden, not foreign born, but to at least one parent who is foreign born, not even both parents, but just one parent who is from outside the country, they have a 150% greater chance of committing crimes. And again, keep in mind, this number is brought down by the fact that American, Canadian, New Zealand immigrants, all the peaceful countries, are averaged in there, right? This is painting a very, very, very clear picture. And from reports on the ground, from everything we can gather, while unfortunately there's no more government data released about specific numbers like this for 2016 in regards to race of perpetrator, we can look at reports on the ground and reports from Sweden and make the fairly safe estimation that things have not particularly improved, okay? And the refugees in Sweden don't seem to be raping less, unfortunately. I really wish they were, but it doesn't seem to be. And if I had to throw in some additional stuff into this video to kind of prove Trump is right, I would point to some what people are now calling no-go areas. Areas where the police don't want to follow people. Areas where tourists and journalists, reporters, citizens, they stay away because it's easier, because it's a little dangerous, right? And this is not just some made-up thing, right? You can find, and I can't even link to all of them, but I'm about to play you some footage, and there will be links in the description for stuff that you guys can check out. But you can find Swedish police officers. You can find journalists. You can find these people giving interviews and talking about how dangerous it is and how careful they have to be to say anything, and how they really don't want to be labeled a racist. And I just watched one interview in specific where this poor police officer in Sweden is talking about how because he's blonde, he feels especially a lot of pressure to be like, man, I need to be careful to not, say anything because the racism card is so serious. And I agree, man. It's such a serious charge these days. You lose your job, you lose your career, you be unable to provide for your family if someone paints you as a racist, right? So you got to be careful with these statements these days, because the left is absolutely vicious when it comes to ostracism and getting people fired and things like that. So yeah, we're going to play a little bit of footage from the 2016-2017, just a couple months ago, New Year's Eve celebrations in Malmö, Sweden. And Malmö is basically an entire city in Sweden that's now a no-go area, where it's basically just devolving to a primitive and inferior culture. And yeah, I said it, primitive and inferior culture. Check out the video. Watching that level of chaos doesn't start to paint the picture for you. Check out these clips from when reporters or journalists try to go into the area to better understand what is going on.
This is Rinkeby, a leafy northern suburb of Stockholm, also a completely Islamic area. The police have said this is a complete no-go for them and for journalists. Here, a 60 Minutes crew from Australia is attacked while doing a story on Rinkeby.
I got Swedish girlfriend. Sometimes I say we go to Rinkeby, he's scared.
Right.
He's scared.
Is it dangerous here sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah.
We found out exactly how dangerous when, while we were setting up a shoot at a neighboring location, we were approached by 5 men and told to leave. While my crew took off, I stayed to simply ask why we had to leave. Because I was still wired, we have the sound of what happened next. How come it's a problem to film here?
I don't want to be filmed.
I know, but why? What's the why?
I just don't want to.
But why?
Let me see. Let me see. Hello. Let me see.
I'm not filming anything. Look.
Show me what you got.
Let go of me.
Show me what you got.
Show me.
Show me your phone.
Let go. I'll show you.
I don't want your phone. Show me.
Let go. And I'll show you. I was not the first person assaulted by gangs of immigrants, nor will I be the last.
Pretty scary stuff, right? Wow. Would not want to be a reporter in Sweden. And there's more, of course, and there's really not even time because this could be such a long presentation, and I'm trying to keep it more concise, but things like Sweden banning Christmas streetlights. What a sad thing going on. And of course they cite safety as the reason, but just, the general kind of vague, just for safety, And safety from what exactly? I mean, is it technically sort of theoretically a fire hazard? I guess any light is theoretically a fire hazard. But there's been a lot of people saying that it's just because they don't want to anger the Muslims, and that's why Christmas lights are not allowed anymore. And I suspect that even if that's not the reason, I suspect that played a reason, guys. And if you like your Christmas lights in the street, if you like being able to walk through your town without fear of being raped, we might want to learn some lessons from Sweden. Dangerous riots happening, and very sad. And one more thing I'd like to cover to end this video is some thoughts. But why is this happening, guys? Why is this happening? What's going on with Sweden? What's happening there? Is it the government? Is it the people? Is it some combination? Well, yeah, of course, it's some combination, and basically Sweden, which is kind of globally known as a very liberal nation, very progressive, right? Is just on the, let's say, cutting edge of the liberal experiment. I think that's fair to say. I think especially a few years back and even today, people would be proud to take that title. It'd be like, yes, Sweden is on the cutting edge of the liberal and progressive experiment. Fantastic. And I think that, there's some value in being on the cutting edge of trying things out. I mean, I don't want to do it in my community, but Sweden wants to do it. I mean, let their country do what they want to do. But I think being on the cutting edge of these liberal ideas means that you're going to be on the cutting edge of facing the problems they bring. And I think that this is what Sweden is dealing with now, is the cutting edge of immigration problems. And I really do think that this is just going to compound, and you're going to see more and more of this in countries like Germany, right? Because Sweden, just a quick reminder, in case you don't know, this is not just Sweden, right? Huge amounts of rapes in Germany. We have the all the New Year's Eve things that are so terrible, where women are being raped on New Year's at these unbelievable rates, and sexual assaults. And while it maybe seems to be a slow creep sometimes, especially when we're looking at it from the vantage point of our foreign countries, our outside countries, compared to the small amount of time relative to the country's history that the immigration has been ongoing, the problems are massive, and the potential effects for the society are even worse than what we talk about in the moment, because these problems are only going to compound in the future. Again, even if you stop immigration today entirely in all Western countries, I don't want to use the phrase "it's too late" because that sounds so dark and depressing, but it's sort of too late in some senses, and that you're kind of, let's say, not happy, but you realize that the migrant population you have now is already difficult to control, already causing you problems, and you don't want to increase the numbers. Well, you don't have a choice, okay? The number of migrants you have is going to increase, and not just because of illegal immigration, but because they breed so much faster. For some reason, a lot of people want to see that as racist, but it's just facts. Facts don't have to be racist. It doesn't have to be racist for me to just point out that Swedish people have basically like negative 500 children. I'm sorry, I'm being dramatic, but Swedish people have basically no children. Actual Swedish-born people. The birth rates in countries like this in Europe are plummeting and very, very low, okay? But the immigrants that are coming in, on the other hand, their birth rate, not low, okay? And I'm not even going to give you specific numbers, because often when you cite them, they seem so ridiculous, people don't want to believe them. But sometimes we're talking on the order of 2 to 3 times as many children for the migrants in these countries. Just double the birth rate. And if you know how birth rates work, you know that this type of increase over a generation or two leads to an enormous amount of people. Right? You have one rabbit who has 2 rabbits, and each of those 2 rabbits has 2 rabbits, and each of those rabbits has 2 rabbits, and right? You see how this happens. Yeah, so anyway, the very last thing I want to cover in this video is Stockholm Syndrome, right? And ironic and interesting and wonderful that Stockholm, Sweden is what this is named for, and now Sweden is undergoing Stockholm Syndrome, in my estimation. And we have a clip here that proves my point. I'll play for you in just a moment. But a depressing amount of the Swedish people have such a liberal mindset that it seems until a migrant is actually pinning them down and raping them, and sadly, sometimes even then, they just continue to make excuses. And they just continue to deflect the problem. And a recurring theme that we see, that you'll see in this clip I'm about to play, is that, of course, the problem in their mind is not the immigrants, is not the migrants, and in fact, that's racist of you to think. The problem is male culture. I mean, despite the fact that native-born Swedes commit rape at rates way down here compared to migrants, despite that, see, the real problem is just male culture and just misogyny, right? And it's even men saying this, which is blowing my mind a little bit. But that's what this disease looks like. That is what is happening in Sweden, is the people are asking for this. Not just the government, it's not the people. The people, and by extension the government, largely want the migrants. They just cannot yet wake up to the realities. And part of what the government is doing is hiding from the people the information that they need to see that the migrants are a problem. And it's not some huge conspiracy theory thing, or the government's full of lizard people trying to write. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I really do think the government there is just largely an extension of the people's will. And I think the people want to live in a la-la land, nonsense, illusory bubble world where people's feelings are protected at the expense of a lot of other things. And yeah, let's protect the feelings of everybody, and let's protect the feelings of the migrants. Let's not release any data about how North African men are 20 times more likely to rape you than a natural-born Swede. Let's not release that data. It hurts feelings. Right? That's Sweden these days. Check out this video.
Do you think the sexual assault problem is an Islamic problem or not really?
No. I think it's a general problem among men.
Yeah, the problem isn't like this culture or that culture. The problem is male culture.
I don't think the immigrants is the problem.
No, it's not. Like, that's just like a tiny bit of the problem. And like, when that happens, like, it's because we didn't like bring them in the right way.
And I don't see that connection at all. And I would very much like to see the evidence of such a connection.
Do you think it's almost racist to make that connection?
Yes, I think so.
Is there a point where you think that Sweden's done too much to bring people in, or do you think there's...
No, there is no too much in helping people.
And is there a limit, do you think, to how many immigrants Sweden can take?
No.
Now, isn't that some depressing stuff? I would like to think that the guy filming this was just very selective and went and interviewed everybody with pink hair to try to get the stupidest responses possible. But sadly, based on what the politics of the country is doing, I don't think this guy is that far off. I suspect that this is fairly representative of the young people in Sweden. This video I just played you. And that about ends my presentation, to be honest. I'm going to wrap it up there. It's pretty depressing stuff, but if you desire any more information on the subject, if you want to kind of probe into it a little deeper, you doubt some of the stuff I'm saying, I would refer you to several absolutely wonderful presentations on this subject by Stefan Molyneux, one of my favorite presenters, that he's done with a wonderfully intelligent Swedish woman who I'm going to butcher the pronunciation of her name, to be honest. I try, but Carlqvist. And she has some wonderful things to say about this issue. And she's actually from Sweden, and so she has much more credibility than I do, just being an American on this. And it's a good watch, and we're going to link that down below for you. So check out Stefan's presentation if you want some more. And yeah, that's about all. Trump was right again. Have a good one, guys.